Chapter 8. It was a gloriously beautiful Monday morning on the East Oaks, and at last the big day had arrived. The blue skies were soaring above London town, the wispy clouds floating endlessly. It was a most perfect day for setting sail aboard the Adriatic, en route to Australia. Meanwhile, Basil was busily sorting out his belongings and quickly shoved them in an old drawstring sack. He would hate to leave anything behind and had less than an hour to catch the train up to Liverpool. He was also waiting for Maud to arrive, and luckily, not long after, there was an eager pounding against the front door.
"Hey, bollocks! Open up!"
cried an excited voice behind the wood. Basil swung open the front door and was greeted by that tall, blonde, lanky friend of his.
"Ha! Glad you could make it.
He muttered sarcastically.
Now let's get the hell out of here."
Maud was grinning from ear to ear.
"I could barely bloody sleep last night." "Me either,"
chuckled Basil, bolting shut the door.
"Watch out!
Cried Maud as he fell out onto the street.
Two crazy men about to be on the loose." "Speak for yourself,"
snickered Basil.
"You ready?"
Maud eagerly slapped Basil across the back.
"Ripe and ready, lad."
He winked with a sly grin.
"How's your mama?" Don't even ask. She's been crying since last night. Actually, she's been crying since last week. She'll get over it. She has to."
Basil stopped and turned over his shoulder, glancing back toward the study. He, too, had a heavy heart.
Won't be seeing this place for a while. If you keep looking, you'll change your mind."
Maud smirked.
"Not a chance, mate."
Basil laughed.
"So, let's get the hell out of here and have us an adventure."
Maud hollered, kicking his heels together.
"What time's boarding?" 4 o'clock. We got plenty of time."
The two of them threw their drawstring sacks over their shoulders and hastily wandered down the Thames on their way to Euston Station. Later, they reached Liverpool with only a half an hour to spare.
God, we're lucky we left when we did.
Maud rushed, listening to the throbbing horns filling the dewy afternoon air. A final call for passengers to board. The two of them squinted up into the afternoon sun at this glinting masterpiece. The RMS Adriatic was indeed one of the finest, not to mention fastest cruise ships that ever roamed the azure seas. And now it was anchored all but a few hundred yards away.
I've never seen such a boat like this,"
Maud exclaimed, watching its two chimneys puffing away.
"Bloody size of it." "It looks like we're in by the skin of our teeth,"
Basil added, glancing around the rushing faces clambering aboard.
"We could have missed the boat. Literally."
Maud stammered. The two of them shared a sobering glance.
"And the more you keep talking,"
Basil interjected,
"the slower we are. So zip it, and let's run. Quickly."
Basil and Maud scurried into the merging crowds of many hundreds of travellers, shoving their way into a messy line. At least that's how it was in third class. Basil peered over at the first class line, and everything seemed orderly and relaxed. The first class passengers didn't even have to lift a finger on their own luggage.
"Look at that."
Basil nudged Maud, whom was pushing his way through.
"Yeah,
Maud glanced over his shoulder.
toffee-nosed pricks. I'll bet they enjoy the Turkish bath on there."
Basil glanced up along the hull of the monster ship.
"What? A bunch of prats rubbing soap over each other?
Maud scoffed.
Not my idea of enjoyment.
He peered over at Basil.
But I bet you would enjoy that, wouldn't you?"
Basil shrugged his shoulders.
"Always up for new experiences."
He jeered.
I'd enjoy it if it were lasses rubbing me up with soap. My word."
Maud licked his lips.
"Get a shuffle on."
Basil pushed him in the back.
"I'm ready!"
cried Maud as the two got their tickets punched.
The good Lord give me a bloody adventure to remember.
Basil glanced at his best friend happily.
Oh, I think you'll get one. I think we both will.
Chapter 9.
Why is it that when a lass seems interested in you, she plays the bloody hard-to-get game?
Sputtered the finely dressed gentleman, glaring at Basil intently.
I mean, I'm sure to be richer than any chump on this boat, and for Christ's sakes, I'm still without a woman. I don't understand it. Do I indeed look repulsive to you? Is it my suit? My moustache? And believe you me, I'm not lacking in any area.
The gent sucked hard on his cigarette and blew out a mouthful of smoke.
Now then, how about you?
He leaned into Basil.
You're a handsome and slippery-looking young chap. What's your experience with them? Oh, God. Here we go.
Basil swallowed. He was put on the spot and felt the steaming fire rise in his cheeks, not at all knowing how to answer this slightly drunken gent with his pomade-brown wavy hair.
Well, come along then. Do be out with it.
The brash gent interrupted impatiently. Suddenly his eyes widened, as if he was hit with an epiphany.
What?
He gasped disbelievingly, unbuttoning his black velvet tux jacket.
Ah, no. Don't tell me you're still up there. No, I am not.
Liar.
Oh, thank Christ. You almost had me for a minute. Can't imagine a young chap such as yourself has never dipped the stick in the honey pot.
He cackled, sipping from a crystal tumbler of liquor.
Yeah, I can't either.
Basil laughed with him. He was so embarrassed that all he wanted to do was to jump over the side of the ship and get away from the boldness of this gent immediately. And despite his stunningly good looks, it was no secret that Basil severely lacked experience with the opposite sex, and obviously, this type of talk was totally out of his league. He knew he had to come up with something fast.
Well, you see, the thing is,
The gent searched Basil's face.
Basil. My name is Basil. Very well.
The gent smiled courteously, thrusting out his hand.
Tory. You see, Basil,
He pointed a finger up toward the swanky deck of first class, while jiggling his glass of liquor.
there's a blonde lass up there, all dolled up to the nines, and she comes up behind me and purrs in me ear, saying she wants to have the next dance.
He said, moving closer to Basil's face, inhaling on his cigarette and blowing the smoke out into the warm southerly ocean breeze.
So here's stupid me, slugging down me warm brew, ready to jig it up. You know, meat on a platter tonight kind of thing. And I turn around and the bitch is gone, already jigging it up with some other greasy chump.
Tori let out a forceful sigh, smothered in rejection.
The bastard cut my lunch, swear on my mother's life. Off of this ship, I can snag any lass I want. But on it, I'm a cursed man.
Basil was stunned. Clearly, Tori wasn't used to any rejection of any sort. He watched Tori purse his lips together aggressively, knocking back the rest of his liquor.
Admittedly, I'm not the most handsome of men.
Tori concluded, loosening his tie.
No, I'm not ashamed to announce it. But if only they knew how much sterling I had. Christ, wouldn't I become immediately handsome?
Shaking his head, he sputtered obscenities under his breath, full of disdain, taking a long draw on his cigarette once more, and turned to the crimson-colored ocean for answers. His soured face reflected the rich magenta hues of a melting equatorial sunset. And Basil, at a loss for words meanwhile, became distracted by a group of merry folk spilling out onto the top deck, laughing and frolicking amongst themselves. The ambience was jovial aboard the Adriatic, at least it was in first class, with a great swing big band playing robustly amongst the frivolities. He then turned back to Tori. and sighed deeply, watching the melting sunset, for the sight of such a splendid natural event, coupled with the soft rocking of the ship, made him more relaxed than he could ever remember.
So, I'm just wondering, why are you down here in second class?
Basil quizzed Tori, breaking the long silence. Tori turned and glared at Basil as if he had asked a stupid question.
Why am I down here for?
He responded incredulously.
Why are you down here for?
Tori threw Basil off guard.
Well, I paid for third class.
Basil answered with a slight shrug.
I'm not even supposed to be up here on second. Don't give me that.
Tori retorted, slightly spitting into Basil's face.
You're a fine-looking lad, and surely the envy of many. You should be in first class. I don't even know what you're talking about,
protested Basil uncomfortably.
Oh, nonsense.
Tori scoffed.
Someone like you doesn't need money or title to get the finest women up there tonight.
He pointed a stern finger.
You'd have those wanton birds under your wings, nesting the whole bloody night. No poor bastard, or rich one for that matter, would stand a chance against you.
Basil bashfully laughed off Tori's comment, feeling very awkward.
What is this conversation? A bloody well good one.
Tori defended, throwing his arms out in front of him.
And besides, the sunsets are better in second class. I feel normal down here. Look, I'm sure you and I come from very different backgrounds.
Basil began, wanting to lose this guy.
And by the looks of you, you have something I don't. And that's nobility, prestige, and wealth. And as far as I know, that's the way of the world.
Tori squashed Basil's polite manner immediately.
Indeed, yes. But someone that looks like you don't need all that bollocks.
He detested.
Those things you mentioned are like the wind. They come and go very easily. And whilst prestige and wealth come in handy for arrangements such as marriage, you and I aren't talking about weddings here. Well, what exactly are we talking about?
Basil snickered.
Carnal, lustful, one-night desires.
Tori eyed him lowly.
What the hell is this guy on about?
Basil thought to himself. Basil decided to change the subject. He wasn't liking the way this conversation was going with this gent of obvious stature, coupled with an onset of drunkenness.
My best friend's actually feeling a bit seasick,
he said, gesturing in Maud's direction, over Tori's shoulder.
That's him, the tan blonde one over there.
Tori glanced toward the back end of the deck, where a huge pool and sun deck was, laden with scantily clad folk of all shapes and sizes. Maud, meanwhile, appeared to be in fine form, surrounded by several bathing beauties. He eventually noticed Basil and Tori looking in his direction, and gave them a double thumbs up.
Ha ha! Oh, my word! Looking seasick.
Tori scoffed.
And if I may be so frank, not even half as good looking as you, and yet, still, he wound those ladies on his line. Just look at the jammy bastard.
Basil smiled and glanced at Tori.
Like I said, him and me are third-class passengers,
he assured.
Only up on second because we weaseled our way through. Very well, then.
Tori concluded earnestly, throwing his cigarette butt carelessly into the ocean.
Carpe diem. Enjoy it while it lasts. And hopefully you get more fucking luckier than me.
And with that, the polished-looking gent, Tori, took his tail tuxedo self back upstairs to join the rest of the opulent folk in first class, leaving Basil behind, bewildered in his midst. The Grand Adriatic had finally left the cerulean waters of the Mediterranean, now bound for the mysterious warm waters of Egypt. Basil left Maud to do away with his bevy of women and wandered leisurely around the deck of the ship. And truthfully, he didn't want to socialize with anyone else. for his dalliance with Tori was more than enough for one night. He was used to being on his own, so being around hundreds of people all the time was an adjusting experience for him. Listening to his boots clunk along the deck of second class, the pertinent distraction of the deep orange sun smothering itself across the magenta skies was vying for Basil's attention, and he gazed at it as it lazily slipped into the west. A warm, gentle sea wind picked up and softly caressed his black locks around his bronzed face. He contemplated and people-watched. He studied all the faces passing him by, as if he was looking from behind a pane of glass, watching them as they played, ate, and cavorted around him. After, he went to the front of the ship, noticing the coast of Port Alexandria bobbing slowly toward them in the far distance. Basil found his thoughts being drawn to the Great Pyramid of Giza and what it might look like in real life. He remembered the great tales in the diary of Belzoni, whom talked of this elusive and ancient wonder of the world. And funnily, as he did so, he felt as something had changed within him, stirring the depths of his heart as he observed this majestic sunset. Savoring the beautiful moment, he gently closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, filling his lungs with the tepid, salty air. Suddenly, he was distracted by a tingling sensation against his chest. As his breath caught in his throat, he peered down at the mysterious medallion under his shirt. And actually, he hadn't taken it off since the night he found it. Basil liked it, he decided. He gently touched his fingers onto it and immediately felt a subtle, pulsating rhythm emanating from it.
Wow.
His befuddled eyes widened. It was as if the medallion was responding to him, like it had a life of its own. Nervously, Basil quickly glanced behind him to make sure he was still alone.
Phew.
He peered down at it one more time, noticing a dull blue glow coming from the center stone.
Weird.
He whispered to himself. He almost wanted to run to Maud and show him, but after the last experience he had when sharing the medallion with him, Basil honestly couldn't be bothered. And besides, he wanted to keep this moment for himself, and he didn't need Maud's nod of approval. And so there he stood, silently watching the wavering sun becoming defeated by a violet twilight, until the skies turned black, littered with brilliant stars ablaze. He was hungry and decided to go downstairs for a bite to eat and a cherry drop soda.